If you were in my husband's position, seeking solace in the arms of another, what would you do? I'd love to hear your thoughts. As for me, an undeniable connection started to develop between a coworker and myself as this post comes to an end. Despite the tediousness of office life, we couldn't deny our growing feelings for each other. Our lives kept intertwining, igniting a spark between us. We kept igniting a spark between us, which eventually led to a fire. The harmless exchanges we had turned into hidden looks, drawn-out conversations, and sneaky opportunities for closeness. Our connection grew stronger with each passing week, and the forbidden nature of our relationship only fueled our attraction to each other. Whenever we needed a break from the monotony of our daily lives, we found solace in each other's company. It was the perfect antidote to our routines. The boundaries between friendship and a more intimate connection became hazy, and we both willingly succumbed to the irresistible allure of passion. Keeping our relationship under wraps became the tie that bound us. It was an exhilarating yet nerve-wracking game that evoked equal measures of thrill and anxiety. Sneaking around to steal kisses in private nooks and rendezvousing without anyone's knowledge under the guise of work obligations fueled the passion of our taboo romance, which was amplified by our physical connection. We deluded ourselves into feeling indestructible, believing that our furtive affair could persist covertly within the confines of our workplace. The day my cheating partner's spouse showed up at our doorstep and broke the news to my husband was a nightmare. Until then, I had convinced myself that my affair was solid and that my husband would never find out. But the repercussions of my choices caught up with me, and the weight of my guilt and remorse left me feeling powerless. The life I had meticulously built was now on the brink of collapse due to my actions. The day of the tragedy started off no differently than any other typical workday. It was a Friday, and as I bid farewell to my husband with a hug and a kiss, I was completely unaware that the facade of our flawless marriage that I had meticulously crafted was on the verge of being obliterated. I had been so consumed with the demands of my job and going through the motions of my day that I hadn't even noticed the brewing storm that was rapidly approaching. My husband was relishing his day off by indulging in his favorite pastime of playing video games on his PlayStation 5. Little did he know that an unfamiliar person was about to enter our lives, carrying with them the weight of a truth that would completely upend everything. The tranquility of our home was abruptly interrupted by the jarring sound of the doorbell. My husband had no inkling that anything out of the ordinary was about to occur when he opened the door. However, he was immediately taken aback by the sight of a woman he had never met before. She introduced herself as the wife of a man I was having an affair with at my workplace. As she divulged the heartbreaking truth that had been shrouded in secrecy, my husband was left reeling. The gravity of her words hung thick in the air for what felt like an eternity. She inadvertently revealed that her spouse and I had been engaged in an affair. Our betrayal had been ongoing for a significant period of time. She disclosed that she had discovered our transgressions 6 months prior and had confronted her spouse about the affair. She had believed that the affair had ended after their conversation. However, our desires had overridden any sense of morality, and we had resumed our covert liaison. She had reached out to me in a last-ditch effort to salvage her marriage. She cautioned me to steer clear of her partner in case she revealed everything to my spouse. However, my arrogance and the allure of our forbidden liaison clouded my judgment, and I brushed off her warnings as idle threats. I convinced myself that our affair could continue without any adverse consequences. But as the truth started to unravel, the foundations of my life began to crumble around me. My husband, who had been blissfully unaware of my affair with another man, was now confronted with a reality that he had never expected. In a daze of disbelief and heartbreak, he made a decision that would irrevocably alter the course of our lives. He left a note before vacating our shared home and sought solace in an Airbnb and the guidance of a lawyer. The betrayal had inflicted immense anguish upon him, and he resolved to terminate our marriage and sever all ties that had once bound us. The initiation of the divorce proceedings reinforced the irreversible damage that I had inflicted. My husband was consumed with fury and the need for retribution, and refused to keep the affair confined to our marriage even after it had been exposed. The betrayal had contaminated not only my personal life, but also the workplace where the affair had originated. My husband, driven by a blend of justified fury and injured ego, devised a strategy to reveal the affair to the very people who had inadvertently facilitated it. He resolved to confront those who had aided the affair, his voice brimming with resolute determination as he dialed the number of the workplace where I was employed. But as soon as the call was answered, he was overcome with conflicting emotions. He felt both fear and determination, as he knew that speaking the truth would have a profound impact on the people involved. As the silence on the other end of the phone grew, his inner turmoil intensified. Nevertheless, my husband remained composed as he revealed the heartbreaking truth to the unsuspecting individuals at his wife's former workplace. He delved deep into the situation, exposing the falsehoods and dishonesty that had occurred within our professional environment. His words poured out like sharp fragments of shattered trust, leaving no room for ambiguity or misinterpretation. The consequences were immediate, as the hallways buzzed with hushed conversations and glances that held a mixture of curiosity, sympathy, and disdain towards the subject at hand. It didn't take long for us to realize that the individuals who had previously been held in high regard were now facing severe damage to their reputations and careers. The consequences of our actions were immediate and far-reaching. The revelation of my private encounter with the other man not only stained my personal reputation, but also had serious implications for my professional life, intensifying the already overwhelming sense of misery. The repercussions of my choices reverberated throughout every aspect of my existence. As a direct and indirect outcome, I was left to bear the full burden of my transgressions alone, consumed by a profound sense of isolation and despair. When the man with whom I had been involved at work withdrew and sought comfort in his own marriage, I was left with nothing but the haunting echoes of remorse and regret, standing amidst the wreckage of my shattered life. I had no option but to come to terms with this harsh reality. The price I paid for my self-centered actions was exceedingly high, encompassing the loss of my husband's love, the disintegration of our marriage, the besmirching of my reputation, and the excruciating turmoil that stemmed from my affair. As I witnessed the devastation wrought by my egocentric desires, I was overwhelmed by regret. I had gambled with love, and the stakes had been too high. The price I paid for my actions was exorbitant. The consequences of my choices would haunt me for the rest of my life, serving as a perpetual reminder of the pain I inflicted on those I held dear. Ultimately, the affair not only shattered the trust between my husband and me, but it also triggered a significant shift in the workplace dynamics. The repercussions of our actions extended far beyond our personal lives. Consequently, I became irrelevant and was left with a trail of broken relationships in my wake.
I was in a relationship with this girl for almost 7 years, and we shared a living space for 6 of those years. My career involved electronic consulting, which entailed configuring systems with a plethora of sensors. Although it was lucrative, it demanded extensive travel. This is just to provide context. At some point, I had a hunch that something was amiss. I couldn't pinpoint it, but my intuition told me so. I usually trust my instincts. Therefore, I resolved to substantiate my suspicion while she was away. I discreetly positioned a tiny sound-activated recorder in every room of our condominium. Since the storage was on my office computer, the device was incredibly small. I executed this plan on a Friday afternoon, spent the weekend with her, and had a pleasant time. However, on Sunday night, I retrieved my luggage and tools, placed a GPS tracker in my car, and departed. The following morning, she left in her car and I departed for my next work site. The initial plan was to be away for a fortnight. During the first week, I conversed with her every day. However, during the second week, she was frequently absent when I called, despite it being the time she typically stayed at home. When I inquired about it, she provided several excuses, such as work meetings, delayed dinners, and assisting her brother. Upon the conclusion of the 2-week period, I returned home and promptly proceeded to my office. Upon reviewing the recordings, I noticed a significant amount of activity during the first week, but very little during the second, except for a loud vehicle passing by. As a result, I decided to revisit the first week's recordings, and to my surprise, I discovered that she was conversing with another man. To make matters worse, she had the conversation on speaker mode, allowing me to hear both sides of the exchange. It turned out that she had been engaging in infidelity from the early days of our relationship. Upon discovering this, I concluded that revenge was in order. My first task was to identify the individual with whom she was having an affair. After conducting some sleuthing, I uncovered that she had met this guy and his spouse and family at a campground where she had been employed before we crossed paths. I then determined where they resided and probed phone records. Since this was a few years ago, people still had landlines, so I searched for the number. The number was listed, which was fantastic. I dialed the number and a man answered. I was ready for this, so I asked to speak with Mrs. Smith in a professional tone. He shouted for her and she came on the line. I inquired if she was aware of my soon-to-be ex-girlfriend. She responded affirmatively, stating that they had invited her over to their residence a few times after meeting her at the campground. That was news to me, and I was taken aback. I informed her that we couldn't discuss the matter in detail at that moment, but if she could contact me when it was convenient, I would provide her with a comprehensive explanation. I shared my cell phone number with her and hoped that she would call back out of curiosity. As anticipated, she contacted me 2 days later. I narrated everything that I had recorded to her, and she was initially incredulous. I assured her that I would duplicate the recording and forward it to her. Although she agreed, she remained doubtful. I had my work cut out for me. I headed over to a nearby recording studio with all the files and briefed them on my requirements. They merged all the distinct recordings together, so when she moved around the house, the conversation was complete. Subsequently, they burned these audio recordings onto CDs. It required 5 CDs to cover the entire conversation. However, I didn't send these CDs to Mrs. Smith. I mailed the CDs to her via registered mail and waited. After about 10 days, she contacted me. She appeared composed and informed me that she had filed for divorce the previous day. Her husband worked on an oil rig and was away for the next 2 weeks. She had listened to the CDs that I had sent her and handed them over to her attorney. Over the years, the woman's husband had amassed a significant fortune through his work, allowing them to acquire various luxuries such as plots of land for camping, a boat, and an RV. However, she was adamant about receiving half of it all. After ending the call, the speaker couldn't help but chuckle to themselves. They had heard some unsavory things on recordings and felt that the husband deserved what was coming to him. Despite this, they never let on to the girlfriend and maintained a normal demeanor throughout. Despite my doubts, I decided to leave a tracker on her car. For the next week, nothing eventful happened. However, chaos ensued soon after. My girlfriend seemed lost and aimless, wandering around the house. When I inquired about her behavior, she told me that a friend of hers was going through a divorce. Although I expressed my sympathies, I continued with my day. Later that evening, I observed her conversing with someone on the phone while sitting on the deck. I wasn't paying much attention, but I did notice her voice getting louder during the phone call. When it ended, she immediately went into the bedroom. I heard her rustling around and became curious, so I walked over to the door. She was packing clothes into suitcases. I asked her what she was doing, but she didn't respond. After finishing her packing, she went out to her car and left without saying a word. After 2 weeks of radio silence from my girlfriend, Mrs. Smith called me to provide an update. She had served her husband with divorce papers, citing infidelity as the cause. Predictably, he denied the allegations, but Mrs. Smith was able to provide specific details that stopped him in his tracks. She also confirmed that the phone call my girlfriend had on the night she left was with her. Although Mrs. Smith denied raising her voice, there was clearly more to the story. Despite my ex-girlfriend's insistence that nothing happened, she eventually let slip some details that confirmed her guilt to my girlfriend. She implied that she had discovered the truth on her own and was planning to tell me next. This revelation explained why my girlfriend had left so abruptly. As a result, I took action by canceling her credit card and initiating the repossession of her car. I arranged for the utilities to be shut off and canceled her insurance. All of her belongings that were left behind were sent to her father's house via movers, along with a note explaining the reason for her sudden departure. Her father lived 2 states away, which made the situation even more complicated. Since we lived in a condo, I arranged for it to be shown for sublease. Within 4 days, I had moved out and settled into a new condo located in a gated community that had a card shack. Finally, her car was picked up and taken away. They repossessed her car while she was at work. Fortunately, the dealership was willing to work with me and sell the car, and I paid the difference. Mrs. Smith was successful in her divorce proceedings and received her fair share, which Mr. Smith never expected, due to his fear of his company finding out about his dirty secrets. As for my ex-girlfriend, I never heard from her again. In the upcoming weeks, I plan to narrate some pro- and nuclear revenge stories from Reddit. I'm not a fan of relying solely on Reddit for content, as it seems to be the go-to source for everyone. However, I've been fortunate enough to receive direct submissions from people lately, which is why I want to diversify the content a bit. I'll still cover cheating stories, but I'd like to mix things up occasionally. I apologize in advance if I end up narrating some stories that you've already heard before. I'd like to express my heartfelt gratitude to my loyal listeners and subscribers. Thank you, thank you, thank you.